Okay, great. So it's 3:01. I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone. This is Lars Keil. I'm the Director of Lacrosse Operations here for the Harvard Men's Lacrosse team. Also at SideWall Jedi on all of your favorite social networks. Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate you coming and being able to take part in having another live discussion and talking about a few things. So what I am here to really talk about today is a couple of quick fixes that I think everyone needs to be able to understand that are simple. You don't have to be a stick stringer. Obviously, you can see a lot of lacrosse heads off to the side of me, everything up on the wall behind me. I am a stringer and a gear guy. And so this is all stuff that I've been doing for a long time, but you don't have to be as into it as I am to be able to use all of these ideas. And so first thing that I want to talk about is a couple of tools that I think every coach at every level, it could be 7-year-olds all the way to through middle school, through high school, and college, and even at the professional level. These are certainly things that I keep around myself, but I think every coach should have. And there's a few things that I'll tell you. Sometimes you don't have to have everything, but some things are very good. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the tools that I keep handy. Now, I keep a kit with screws and a whole bunch of different tools, all sorts of little things that are more specific to all the stringing things. But for any coach that goes out to practice, a few things that I think they should have. First and foremost, I think something like a multi-tool is excellent. This is a Gerber suspension. This was $50, $25, $30. It was not particularly expensive. You do not need to go expensive. You can get inexpensive multi-tools for probably between $5 to $10 at local gas stations or a local hardware store. If you have the ability to do so and you want to get a few more things, being able to have a pocket knife, any kind of variation of that really helps, just because you never know if there's something you need to cut free. I don't have any with me, but you can buy, and I've seen this at a lot of different hardware stores, be it a local Aubuchon or True Value, or even up to Lowe's or Home Depot. You can find, usually at the checkout, when you find all sorts of little tool trinkets, you can see you can get tiny little screwdrivers that will literally attach to your keychain. So that's something that, because you typically are always going to have your keys with you, you can also not put them on your keychain and you can let them hang. I know I typically like to have a whistle around my neck when I'm at practice, when I'm coaching. And so it's something that you can have, because typically you're always going to bring your whistle out with you to practice. So it's just something else that you're able to have on. Something I think you should always keep separate from what your athletic trainer, you can maybe be able to get it from your athletic trainer, but keep a roll of tape around, and I'll get into a little bit in a few minutes about what kind of things that we can use it for. Let's see, small spool. You don't need to get 100 yards or 300 yards, 300 yards or 1,000 feet or anything like that. Something that's small and tiny, just in case a string breaks, or if there's holes in your net. Having something like this around is very, very beneficial. If you can't carry around a little small spool, keeping around a bunch of string kits, like pre-made string kits for players. Not that they just, maybe you can have something separate in the office where they can just pull from if they need it. But this is emergencies only, on the sideline, emergencies only, that they shouldn't be pulling from too much. And then one of the last things that I think is very important, and luckily we're at a time now where there's the technology we're at a place that you can get an electronic or an electric driven screw gun. You can get tiny little ones. I'm going to use this big one right now just for the purpose, but just imagine it's one of the little tiny ones that you can keep in a small bag or in a backpack that is not too heavy. This I keep around in here or in the locker room, and it doesn't leave there, but this is big and heavy. So one of the things that I see a lot I see a lot of times with players, because they will just continue to unscrew and rescrew, and they'll use the same screw in the same shaft or the same head if they change shafts or anything like that. So often you'll see screws that get stripped. So I'll point this camera down a little bit here. The screw will get stripped. So the screw doesn't, the bit, the what do you call it? The threads of the screw often get, those get stripped, or the plastic in the head or the hole that's in the actual shaft will get stripped. The first thing that I like to do to make sure that the screw itself doesn't rattle is I'm going to take a little bit of tape. It's very small. You see how I've already used most of this roll. I'm using about 1 inch of tape. It really doesn't have to be much. And I'm going to wrap it around. You want to be able to get to the head of the screw, but I'm going to wrap it like that. Oops. Around the threads of the screw. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to put it back in the same spot. This is part of the reason why I think it's good to carry one of these guns with you, because doing this, you'll be able to do it with a regular screwdriver, but it'll be a little bit more difficult. But I can get that in there, and it took a little bit more effort than you typically would, but just so that you can see, after I put it in there, I just brought it out for the purpose, all of the tape turns to gunk, and it mucks up in between all of the threads, and it'll help make sure that that screw stays in place if the holes have already been drilled out too much. Another thing that I would recommend, if you notice there's only holes on one side, that part of the reason why I want you to use these, and this is, I think the STX string kits are the best on the market. Part of it's because of how long the strings are, but every single one of those kits comes with an extra screw. If you need to, I'm going to put this, I'm going to flip the shaft around. Okay, I drilled too big of a hole. These screws that come in there, if you can see that, it has a self-tapping tip that I can use to drill a new hole. Let's assume I just did that. You can drill a new hole in the shaft. Drilling a hole in a shaft is something you really need to have a gun for. Well, I'm not going to take so much time, but that will work if you're doing it on a flat and stable surface. The next thing that I would like to talk about is if there's head rattle, if the head is actually moving around too much, and as you're throwing and catching, you can hear clicking because there's too much space in between the shaft and the inside of the head. Now, I've seen lots of players who will do some variation of wrapping tape around this way, like a candy cane. I don't like to use that way because it's too easy to add too much tape, and it can stretch out the bottom of the plastic. The plastic on the bottom and the throat of your head will only ever get, if it gets too big, it won't be usable. So the thing that I like to use, and I like to use a thicker version, a thicker roll of tape in this case, I'm going to use 3-4 inches. And I am going to start it going up one side. I'm going to try and you got to make sure you center it, go over the top, and bring it down the other. Now I'm going to, from this point, I'm going to be very careful, and I'm wrapping the tape so that it's hopefully not overlapping too much. And then the two bits on the top, I'm going to the middle there. So I'll go back down this way. Now, instead of wrapping around and adding too many layers out so that the head of the stick won't, or the throat won't fit onto the actual shaft here, I've just pushed everything out in about the same degree of difference, or about the same measurement outwards. So I can put that head on there. Notice there's no screw in there, but that head, it shouldn't move anywhere. It should stay nice and tight on the shaft. Then you can put the screw in afterwards. Next, if you have a head where the strings are too long, not many times it's happened to me as a coach in the last 15 years, but when I am coaching, the rules state that these strings need to be, I think, 2 inches or less. Only one time have they ever been too long, to the point where a ref came up to me before the game and said, hey, you need to check out the strings on a couple of your player sticks. Now, if I had the time, if this happened 20 minutes before the game, I would grab a pair of scissors or a knife and I would cut them. And typically I keep lighters with me, and I would burn the ends of these. I didn't have enough time. The ref came up to me maybe 2 minutes before the game was going to start, and said, you're going to get a penalty if any of those guys are on the field. So what did I do? I walked around to everybody that needed to have their strings shortened. I folded them in half and I wrapped them up with tape. This is a quick fix in the unlikely event that you have strings that are too long. Sometimes if there's, you might be able to just tie a few more knots. And so a string that might be 6 or 7 inches long, you can tie a bunch of knots and all of a sudden it gets down to 2 or 3 inches, and then it's not something you need to worry about. But wrapping it up with tape to shorten everything is a great way that takes 15, 20 seconds, but making sure you have this handy is very important. Sometimes I have been in a situation, this so for all of our youth coaches and younger, I don't know how many young players we have, but for youth players, if they have a shaft that's too long and they just, their hands keep going down, these are for very short, younger players, and they need to learn how to choke up, and you know that you're going to cut the shaft, but you don't know how low you should cut it. Using tape is a great way to make a false butt end, because most of the butt ends that you'll find and you can buy today, you can't slide to wherever you want. There are some manufacturers that make kind of a thing that you can go around and tighten into a spot, but this is a very inexpensive way to just make a quick butt end and to be able to give a player something. And I did this very quickly. You can obviously use more tape and wrap around and make this nub a little bit bigger, but that way they have something that when their hand goes down, they can still go down a little bit farther if they need to, but if you make it big enough, you know, okay, I like that length. And you can use this for long sticks too, for the ages where having them use a 6-foot shaft is too much and you want to use something a little bit shorter. Coach Byrne can talk to you about his stick. Him being a very tall gentleman, he doesn't use a full length shaft. If you want to find out a great way to measure how long you want your shaft to be, use a little bit of tape. Lastly, something that happens more frequently than I would like, but I know a lot of players are not in a position where did I just put that head? There's a lot of players who are not in a position to, or they don't know how to look at their stick every day and check their strings. It's something that I am particularly I pay particular attention to with my players, because obviously I don't want something to happen where a sidewall breaks in pregame and then the player in particular has, you know, like freaks out because they'll come up to you and be like, what do I do? My stick is broken, or my sidewalls have broken. This is another reason why we should have spool or an extra thing of extra string kits. Even if you don't have those, having tape is extremely important. And usually there's a player will have tape if for some reason you don't have it. Now, what I did in this case, rather than take the time during the video, I did this ahead of time. But I've had instances where a piece of string is either has broken entirely or is almost ready to break. And so if I know, like, okay, if this kid goes out and plays right now in a game, it's very likely that that string is the last strands are gonna come apart, and it's not going to be able to be used. So one of the things that I have done is I will make, if I don't have a string kit or a small spool, I will make string out of tape. So I'll hang it like this and I will spin. I'll spin it a couple of times. And now what I'm doing, this is a very quick fix and it's temporary. You should not be doing this or relying on this for a long, for a long-term fix. Like, oh, this will last me another month. No, this should last you the rest of the day. And so I'll do that. I spin it, I twist it. This is, it's very sticky and that will help. Now, what I used in this case is I used very, very thick pink string so that everyone can see a white head with white string and white mesh. Basically what I would do, imagining that part of the sidewall string in here, which you can see is white string, imagining that a piece of that broke. I am using, I have some extra holes in the case on this head. So imagine that I took my rope that I just made out of tape and I kind of tie a knot in the tape. I put it through one of the holes. I wrap around to make sure that wrapping around, I'm not pulling it too tight so it deforms the pocket, but just enough so that it's taking pressure off of the area of the string that might be close to broken. That way, it's not putting as much stress on that little piece of almost broken string, and I'm preserving the shape of the pocket so the stick performs the way it should, at least, hopefully, for the rest of the game. That's about it for me. I've got a little bit more. If anybody has any questions about anything that I've done, please throw it up into the comments right now. Let's see. Feel free. You might use the tools for advice. Coach, I think that's what I did with using the tools. But if I didn't do it exactly, please, exactly how you meant in the comment, please let me know what you mean. If anybody has, if no one has any questions about the stuff that I've talked about today, I've got a couple more minutes before our next speaker comes on. And okay, if anybody has any questions that they can't think of right now, but they think that that they want to, or they need to ask of me after I finish in a moment, please, you can DM me on Instagram. It's at SideWall Jedi. You can send me an email. It's lars@sidewalljedi.com. And I'm happy to help with any questions that you might have regarding this or stringing or anything else that you think I might be able to help you with. Thank you very much, everyone who came in today and who's listening. And here we go with our next speaker. Thank you very much.